Hi, my name's Leigh Collins. I'm going to be on Rebuilding the Beast with Festus, Ezeli. And we're going to be talking about mental health, PTSD, surviving sexual assault. And thank you.
Hey guys, welcome to Rebuilding the Beast. I'm your host, Festus Ezeli, NBA player turned podcast host. And on this show, I'm going to have my inspiring friends come on to share with you their rebuilding journeys. I hope it inspires you as much as it does for me. Oh, and don't forget to hit subscribe, like, comment, share with a friend. Yeah, all the things. All right, I'll see you guys soon.
Yo, we are in beautiful Malibu. This is the first time we're shooting here in this scene, this location. How you feeling?
I'm good. I'm excited to be outdoors. This wasn't what I was expecting, but I'm thrilled.
Actually, it wasn't what I was expecting either. This is beautiful.
Really beautiful.
Welcome to Rebuilding the Beast.
Thank you.
Shout out to Bob and Marielle for this beautiful location. This is amazing.
This is really nice. It's surreal.
I don't really know what to do with my feet and my legs, so this is kind of what we're doing. So if you,
it's okay. You're relaxed.
okay, all right. As long as
I'm
it's okay
hoping my
with you.
voice will relax you even more as we
Yes.
go. Just don't relax too far and fall off the back.
All right. So you got to do the welcome to Rebuilding the Beast.
Welcome to Rebuilding the Beast with Festus Ezeli.
And
what? I introduced myself. My name is Leigh Collins. I'm currently rebuilding the beast. Trying to live up to the moniker.
don't you just love the way she says Rebuilding the Beast? So you have a really dope story. Very interesting story. The rebuild is interesting. The experience is traumatic. It's not great, but the rebuild is interesting, and the way that you use your story is actually what's the best part of it. Before we get into all that, of course, before we get into that, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm nervous.
Really?
This is the first interview I've ever done on this topic, so I apologize if I'm a little fumbly bumbly when I'm responding, but
I will do my best
I
to
trust.
make it seem as relaxed as possible, as you can see.
As you can see. I'm already 10% there.
Yeah. No, thank you for wanting to be here and to share your story. How have you been through the COVID times, through everything? How's life for you right now?
Right now, I feel like I'm in a really good place. I feel like over the last few years, and the last year especially, I've had a lot of pieces move in my life, and I've sought out different coping mechanisms and learning different things about myself that are now kind of culminating into progress that I'm seeing that seems like it's sticking, which I love. And I think especially over the last year, I was lucky to have time to reflect, time to just be with myself, which was a challenge at first.
For all of us.
Right? Just being alone and with your thoughts and having to face things that you were able to just stay busy and avoid was amazing for me, challenging at first, like I said, but then throughout have found, some shone a light onto different sides of myself that I feel like otherwise I wouldn't have been able to.
So can you, before we get into, the traumatic experience you faced in 2018, can you tell me, a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm from the Midwest originally. I'm from Wisconsin. I moved to LA in 2011. I think I saved up like $600 or something like that. And I drove out here. I had to fill up oil every time I filled up gas in like a clunker old car.
Wow.
And got an apartment in Venice and then started working as a graphic designer. And now I am a creative director for Hello Sunshine, which is Reese Witherspoon's company. And it's a mission-based company that puts women at the center of stories and tries to tell more complex stories around women. So it's something that I'm super passionate about because it's very in line with what I'm trying to do in my personal life and turn this story into hopefully something positive that shifts the narrative.
In your Instagram bio,
Mm-hmm.
you say working to change the narrative for women. What do you want to achieve? What do you mean by that?
I think for me, and it's selfish on my behalf because of my personal experience, but what I'd love to see and what I think the company is already doing through their productions is like female characters that are more holistic and dynamic, that can hold two spaces that seem diametrically opposed at the same time, like that seem to conflict with each other. I think to me is the most dynamic characters that you end up seeing like yourself reflected in. And that is, it seems like a newer space for female characters to have that level of complexity and experience rage and experience, despair, and not have that told through the lens of the relationship to a man or, a relationship to being a mother. There's like certain archetypes that's been allowed. And I want to expand on where that is okay. Like what I experienced over the last few years is, my emotions going from places like deep despair to extreme rage to, fear that I couldn't control, behaviors I couldn't control, mental health in general, I think is something that's just now being explored, which your podcast does, which is wonderful. But what I'd like to do is just deepen and enrichen those stories so that women start to see their stories and who they are reflected more and feel acceptance, I guess.
This is really my mission with this podcast, is the idea that everybody has a story that's complex. And a lot of times in what we see out there, we are comparing ourselves to models that are, I don't know, unrealistic. That doesn't
Thin, yeah.
And I just want people to feel seen, especially in the challenges that they face. That's what Rebuilding the Beast is like, how do you get through the challenges that you're faced with? And I hope somebody out there, a younger girl, older woman, whatever, hears your story and says, wow, like I know what that feels like and I need help and I'm struggling. And you're making me feel like there is light at the end of the tunnel or life after this, So thank you for being willing to share your story.
I hope that, is what happens. And I thank you so much for, lending me your platform to tell that story. That has a huge impact for me. And it even just in preparation in coming here today to talk about it, I kept trying to reduce what I wanted to say down to like a soundbite or like some, this is what I want to say. And it's so challenging to do because I think the details are where you find commonality. Like one little detail that someone includes in their story that maybe they don't think is interesting or compelling, that you say like, oh, wait, I used to do that too. That was something that I used to do that I thought was crazy.
Yeah.
And now I feel okay. Someone else in the world went through that too. So I feel very aligned with the mission that you're after.
I hope that you don't feel pressure to dumb it down or anything. Just say it the way that you feel the story. And
well, I'm a perfectionist and a control freak.
Yeah.
So I have to go through that.
Okay. Whatever way you feel comfortable is cool with all of us.
Well, thank you.
So we're going to go into your story a little bit. 2018, you experienced a traumatic event. If it's okay, can you please tell us what happened that night?
Sure. So I do want to say too, for people listening to the podcast, to if you are a victim of sexual assault or rape, to take care before listening to this, because, I do want to give a level of detail that's vulnerable and honest. But so in 2018, I lived in Santa Monica in a walk-up apartment, and I woke up one night, it was a Thursday night, and my dogs were barking, barking really violently. And I thought somebody's outside, somebody's walking their dog. It was maybe 2:45 in the morning, and went back to sleep, got them to be quiet. And then maybe 15 minutes later, they started barking again, even more violently, even more like panicked. So then I sat up in bed. I remember looking at my phone and I think it said like 3:04 in the morning. And I looked and my bedroom door was illuminated by like twinkle lights that were in the living room. And I saw just a figure poke his head in the doorway and peek into my bedroom. But when I saw it, it was like, you know, when it's nighttime and you think to yourself, you know, like, oh, I just saw that. I didn't really see what I saw. Like, I didn't trust myself and I didn't believe that something that terrifying could be real. Like, I told myself, maybe it's a friend playing a trick on me. Maybe it was a trick of the eyes. And I didn't take my phone. I didn't take anything to protect myself. I just got up and walked out. And I walked out into the living room. And I think I was saying, hello, is anybody there? Walked into the dining room and it was darker in the dining room. And then I walked into the kitchen and there was a man standing up against the wall. And he had one of my knives from my knife set in his hand. And immediately I said to myself, like, this is a nightmare person. This is not a friend. This is a nightmare. And I quickly looked him up and down and noticed like he has a red hat. He has a goatee. He has a sweatshirt on, you know, like, and just took inventory of what he was wearing, thinking, I'm going to need to tell this to someone. And I started screaming and running backwards. He ran toward me and caught up with me. And he grabbed me by the hair. I had my hair up in like a bun. And he grabbed me by the hair with his left hand and put his right arm around my neck and put the knife to my throat and said, can we swear on your podcast? Is this a cuss-free zone?
Yeah, no, you can do whatever you want.
And he said, where's the fucking money? You see I have a knife. I'll fucking kill you. Where's the fucking money? And he stood me up. We were walking. He was behind me and he had the knife to my throat. And he walked me into one room, walked me into another room. I had $30 cash in one of the rooms that I grabbed and I passed back to him. And then he said, so what else do you have for me? And then all this time I'd been going through in my mind, like, is he, you know, someone I lived right across from like a homeless outreach center, and people had stopped by before and asked for directions and, you know, were always just gracious and it was a fine exchange. So I was thinking, is he lost? Is he looking for the homeless outreach center? And was trying to kind of take inventory. Like, does he seem erratic? Like, does he seem like he's high? You know, like, does he seem like he maybe has cognitive issues?
I have a lot of awareness for a situation where a lot of people would just be panicked and just frantic.
Well, that's something that I've talked with the police and the detective about afterward, that like, there's something about the way my mind in that moment decided to slow down and get super clear. And I don't have mastery of that. That's not something that I've practiced or been taught or sought out. And I've been in situations before with sexual assault where I've frozen. And so I wouldn't have been able to predict that my brain would react with slowing down that way and having that clarity. But I'm so grateful that it did. But so he said, what else do you have for me? And up until that point, I was still thinking like, he wants to rob me and then he's going to leave. And after he said that, it wasn't that he changed. It was that my perception of what was happening changed. And I started to realize why he was there, which was not to rob me, or not solely to rob me. So he walked me into my bedroom and he told me to stand up against the wall. And I started sobbing. And I started begging and saying, I thought this would matter. But I kept saying, I'm a nice person. You don't have to do this. I'm a nice person. You don't have to do this. And just kept repeating that. And he told me to shut the fuck up and put my hands on the wall. And he felt my breast under my shirt. and started making like moaning sounds. And then he told me to get on my bed, and he walked me over there with the knife to my throat. The knife never left my throat at any point. So I kind of curled up and got up on the bed, but was curled up, my hands and knees in a ball. And he said, stretch your arms out and touch the thing. And the thing was my headboard. So I did that. And then he said, stretch your legs out. And he started feeling over my clothes and making sounds. And I was still crying, but I was quiet then. And he then said, where are the fucking condoms? And I said, I don't have any. And then he asked again. And I said, I don't have any. And then he told me to turn on my side. And while I was laying there, that for me was when like time really slowed down, because I went through all of these scenarios in my mind. Like, I thought about, if he rapes me, it will ruin my relationship to sex for the rest of my life. And I don't have a daughter, but I thought, if I have a daughter, I'll pass that down to her. I'll pass that pain down to her, like generational trauma. And I thought, he may not rape you and then leave you alive. He may rape you and torture you in ways that you can't fathom, like a room with no consequences and someone that you don't understand the motivations or capabilities of. He has you in a room with no windows. No one knows that he's here. So he could do whatever he wants to do to you for hours and break your spirit. And by the time he's done, if he wants to kill you, you won't have the fight in you to fight back. And thought through all these things, and I thought of this phrase that I had heard but hadn't remembered placing in my mind. But I remember thinking of this phrase: a wolf in a trap will chew off its own leg to survive. Its survival instinct is that strong. And I thought, as long as I have my arms out in front of me, he can cut off both of my arms and I'll still be alive. I'll still have my heart. He can do any damage to my arms and that part of my body. Like, I'll sacrifice that part of my body to survive. And I'll keep coming at him until I have no arms left. And then hopefully he'll be too afraid of me to stay. So I kind of in that moment said goodbye to my arms, thinking that would be what happened. And I was terrified. I was so scared. I was staring at the wall, wishing someone would break in and tear down the wall, tear down the door, and rescue me from this situation. But I realized I have to do it. No one else is coming. I have to do it. So he told me to turn on my side, and he went to get up on the bed. And it was the first moment that he pulled the knife away from my throat. And I screamed, "Somebody fucking help me," as loud as I could, as soon as he pulled it away. And it felt like in an instant, he was on top of me. He was straddling me. I felt what I thought was the butt of the knife in my forehead. Because all I felt was like bop, bop in my forehead. But he was stabbing me with the knife in the head. Right here and just at the very top of my forehead. Stabbed me twice. I'm guessing to get me to be quiet because I was screaming. And then all of a sudden I saw white light, white light, white light. And I realized he's punching you. And I thought, he can punch you 100 times, but if you fall asleep, you die. So you have to stay awake. If he punches you 100 times, you have to stay awake or you will die. And so he punched me 3 times. And I remember thinking, at least he doesn't punch very hard. But I think that was adrenaline. And also he was right-handed and he had the knife in his right hand and he was punching me with his left. But then we started flailing arms. I was punching at him. I punched him in the penis, I remember, and twisted my fist. And we were flailing arms, and I don't remember getting cut when that was happening. I didn't feel it. But I think I got my legs up underneath him and kicked him off. And I still have a twitch, like a physical twitch. It's like a reenactment of that moment that I was free. I've never had agency of my body taken away before. But as soon as he was off of me, I shot up in bed, and I'll never forget that feeling that I'm now back in control of my body. I'm free. And he was on the ground looking at his hands, which now I know why. I didn't know why at the time. But when he stabbed me with the knife, when the knife hit my skull, his hand slid on the blade and he cut himself pretty bad on his hand and had to get stitches the next day. But he was looking down at his hands because I'm guessing he realized how badly he was cut. And I sat up and I somehow knew something was wrong with my left hand, but I didn't feel getting cut. But I looked at my left hand and held it up, and I remember just seeing blood drip from my ring finger and my pinky finger because they had been almost severed by the knife. And that was another moment for me when it changed, that I went from being so afraid and so terrified to angry. And this was something I didn't say in the trial because I didn't want it to be misconstrued, but I felt betrayed by him, and I didn't know him. But it was for someone to cut my body that badly, it felt like a human betrayal, like a human contract was broken, that he was willing to damage me that badly. And then it also then became clear to me that he was capable of killing me, that like he would hurt me in any way that he had to keep me docile. So I looked down at him. He was still sitting on the floor and I was still sitting up in bed. And I looked down at him and I said, sorry for swearing again, you cut my fucking fingers off? You cut my fucking fingers off? I'm gonna fucking kill you. So I jumped down in between him and the wall and started attacking him with my right hand and punching and kicking and screaming at him, get out of my house, get the fuck out of my house. I'm gonna fucking kill you, get the fuck out. And he got me back down again, pushed me back down onto the ground and kind of pushed my upper back up against the baseboards and slashed at me again with the knife. And I had my arms up in like a defensive position over my neck and face. And then all of a sudden, I just remember he stood up and started running. And so I was like, okay, I guess we're running. So I ran after him. And I knew there was a lamp on one of the tables that I could take the top off of easily. So I just took the top off with my right hand and I grabbed the lamp. It was like a big glass lamp. And I ran after him. He ran for the front door. I ran after him. I started hitting him with the lamp. He reached back with his hand and knocked out of my hand. I grabbed another lamp and ripped it out of the wall. I had a heavy base that was by the door. And I started hitting him with it, still screaming at him. And finally he unlocked the door and ran out into the night and ran off. And from there, everything in my life from that moment was different.
Wow. First of all, I'm sorry that this happened. I'm cringing. I'm all the things as you were talking, because I feel so much for you in that situation. But you got up and you fought this guy. Bravery, is that what I would call this? Is that What was that? What did you think that was? Was that self-defense classes, or was that just your instinct, adrenaline kicking in the moment? Is it just self-preservation,
I don't know. I really I've had a lot of people ask me, the police, the detectives, like friends, family, how did you do that? Because I had never taken a self-defense class. I'm athletic now, but I wouldn't have considered myself an athlete then. I hadn't trained. I wasn't especially strong. I wasn't training for the Olympics. I was just like a regular woman asleep in bed by my estimation. And I honestly just think that I've always been a little bit of a fighter, I guess. Yeah. But being faced with what I perceived as an emotional death or a physical death, I wanted to choose neither. And it was the bargaining, I think, of being willing to give something up in order to have that. I think it was and I've never said this out loud, but I think it was the bargaining to say, I'll give up my arms, and because I just want to survive. I just want to walk away with my heart. And that, I still have my arms. They have cuts on them. They have scars on them. But I think being willing to give something up to get your life back, to get what you want back, made the difference.
After he leaves, were you scared he was going to come back?
Very scared. So, because I didn't know how he got in. Because he struggled so much with the door that it seemed like that was his first time with the door. Which it was, because he had cut through the screen with a knife and broken the security latch and climbed in a window. So when I turned away from the door, I locked it. I locked the deadbolt, and I looked back at my apartment, and there was blood everywhere. And I was shaking, not like shivering like you're cold. I was shaking like back and forth because the adrenaline was so much, and I had so many things pumping through my body. And I just remember looking at my hands were just going in and out like wild with how much I was shaking. And I saw my footprints in the blood, and I walked back into the bathroom, and I looked at my face, and because I had the head wounds and they bleed a lot, I looked in the mirror and it was just red. And I took my fingers and wiped where my eyes were, and then I could just see white in the red. And I looked at myself and I thought, you're alive. He could come back. You need to get your phone. You need to get to safety. You need to get other human beings involved. And I went and got my phone. I called a friend who lived nearby. He didn't answer. And then I called 911. And I lived kitty corner from the police station in Santa Monica. It was maybe like a 2-minute walk to the police station. So the police arrived within, I think, 3 or 4 minutes. And I went outside. The firemen came. The firemen were actually who explained to me how I was hurt and where I was hurt, because I didn't know. I was very focused on my fingers. That was the only cut I knew that I had. But when the firemen got there, they explained to me no, your right forearm is cut, your elbow is cut, your back tricep on your left arm is cut, your head is cut. We need to bandage you up. We're going to touch you here. Is that okay? And they were very I was still very conscious of everything at that time. All the way up through getting into the ambulance and going into the ER, going through the back doors of the ER. And I remember going into the room in the ER, and it was so brightly lit. And I talked about this in my victim impact statement, but they're wheeling me in the gurney into the ER, and it's very late, 3:30 in the morning. And they wheeled past one room that was empty. And I was like, okay. And then they wheeled past another room and it was brightly lit with like 30 people inside. And they went past it. And I was like, man, whoever's in there, they're in trouble. Or like whoever, like must be like a gunshot wound or like somebody bad is going in that room. And then they pulled the gurney back and wheeled me in there. And I was like, oh, this is bad. Like this is serious. And then it was just like a flurry of doctors and nurses and hands around me, cutting my clothes off and, like bandaging me and CT scans. And my family lives in Wisconsin, so they weren't able to be there. So really the nurses, like the female nurses, were trying to cheer me up and saying like, we're so proud of you. A couple of nurses confided in me that they had been sexually assaulted or raped. And they were like, we're so happy that you got away. Like, I think there's just kind of this unspoken coalition of women that they saw me in that condition and they knew what happened. And they all just gathered around my head and they kind of carried me through until my family got there.
When did you speak to your family after this?
So when I was laying in the room in the ER and all the doctors and everybody were around, I couldn't move my arms. So a social worker came up and asked for my mom's phone number or family's phone number. And I gave it to her and she came back in with the phone and held it to my ear and just said, say hello, it's your mom. And I just remember saying hello and my mom was crying and she said, I love you, I'm coming. And I said, I love you too. And she took the phone and walked back out. So that was, and then it was just talking to doctors, talking to attendants, talking to, the different specialists in the ER until I went into surgery. And I was in surgery for, I think, 8 hours. And by the time I woke up, I think my family was there. That's what, like, once I wake up from the surgery, that's where everything starts to get blurry. I think because shock, I think being on that much, I was on a ton of medication. And also it was just a circus. It was like the news and there was like a code name for people to find me and friends were trying to get a hold of me. Friends like that had heard through the grapevine that this had happened. So just the hospital just continued to be like a revolving door of people and there was never really a minute to just process, which I think looking back, I wish that I'd made that happen, like just solitude for a second to process what happened.
I feel like that would have been good to be able to sit with that. I think they probably thought maybe she doesn't need to be alone right now.
I think so, but I think like to sit with my family, like just my family, and just take it in. And I think I was afraid to process. I think I orchestrated it to a degree. Like I wanted it to be a circus, probably because I didn't want to be alone. And I was afraid to really think about what just happened. When I was telling the story to people, I could detach from it a little bit and disassociate from it. Whereas I think actually that's probably true. If I had been alone, I would have been forced to process something that I wasn't ready to process.
So you have this unfortunate event happen in your life, and this comes with trauma. Talk to me about PTSD.
So for me, and I'm just now learning more about PTSD. Like I've read books, and I've, been in women's groups, but I'm just now working with a therapist that specializes and is helping me understand the things that were happening to me, which is helping a lot just to understand why. But for me, the PTSD didn't set in until about maybe a month and a half or 2 months after the attack. And I mean, coming out of it, I had a twitch, which I still have if I get anxious or upset, which is I'll pull my face to the right, which is pulling away from the knife, or I'll shoot forward, like I just got free. Or like my legs will kick or my arms will tense up to punch. So that from the minute I woke up was happening. But like the real like mental challenges, I think started about a month and a half in. And it started with like, I guess you would call it a flashback one night, but it wasn't a flashback to the night. It was just to set the stage a little bit, like I couldn't go back to my apartment. I tried to sleep there, but I stayed up all night. I was with family. I had people with me, but I stayed up all night and planned like, okay, my arm is in a cast. Everyone is asleep. If someone comes in, I'll have to get up and do this. I know that I have this weapon here. I'll have to protect them. And I just kept thinking through the night, like, how will I protect them? How will I protect my family when my arm is in a cast and I'm moving so slow? I won't move fast enough to protect them. So we decided I couldn't stay there anymore. So I didn't have a place to stay. I was kind of bouncing around from friend's house to friend's house, living out of a backpack. And I was staying with a friend, and this flashback happened. And it was a flashback to a previous time where things were good, where things were happy. Basically, I think, the life that I felt was slipping away. And I all of a sudden, I flashed back and there were friends around and it was sunny and we were laughing. And then all of a sudden I was back in this dark apartment that I didn't really know that well. And I was really, really confused. And it was the first time I ever started banging my head, which banging your head, I've learned, is a symptom of PTSD. But I didn't know why I was doing it. I was sitting on this staircase and I just started banging my head against the iron banister. And I just kept banging it because it felt like I was losing my mind. And maybe if I bang it hard enough, something will come back. Or maybe if I bang it hard enough, I'll wake up from this disreality that I just woke up to. And the banging my head stuck around for the worst month. That I would drive to like PT appointments and bang my head by myself, just bang my head against the driver's side window. Like it became like something that I did to comfort myself almost. And it sometimes was much more violent than that. And now I don't, it's subsided, but when things were really scary and hard to process, that was like a self-harm thing that I did to myself to try to jolt myself back to the present moment. But I would have trouble. I still have trouble with chronology from around that time, like the order of things, which I've learned is a typical symptom of PTSD, like putting time in order. Like it's just kind of, instead of in a line, time is in a soup. And so it takes me a minute, like I can pluck it out, but I have to kind of look around and dig around for a minute to make it make sense. And then also, like I mentioned, extreme rage, like little things would set me off to being explosive with rage and anger, like screaming, punching, kicking, like inconsolable. Fear. Like I think at that time I started to get really, really afraid. That I didn't think that people were coming to get me, or that like I was going to be unsafe, or that every man was going to rape me or attack me. But it was more like just a general fear of people that started to set in. And all of those things took a toll on relationships, obviously, like my closest friendships, a romantic relationship I had been in, all started to crumble and fall apart because no one really knew how to deal with this. Like, how do you deal with someone who gets up and runs out of a restaurant, like military style runs out of a restaurant for no reason? Like, people were just, and sometimes I would have good days and sometimes I would have bad days. And it was so nonlinear that I think people just felt, and it's a hugely overwhelming thing to happen. And I think people just didn't know how to handle it, didn't know how to help, felt overwhelmed. But then the toll on me was that all these pieces of my life that made things familiar and made things make sense started to fall away. And it just became me alone all the time. And I started to just feel so lost. And then it became like depression and despair.
A common thing that I've heard of PTSD is, I think, also taking it out on the people that are closest to you.
Very much so.
So in the middle of all this, and I always like sharing like things, so nothing close to this, but I had my place broken into over the Christmas holiday.
What, this last year?
This past Christmas.
You did?
Yeah. And I came back into an apartment they ran through it, they broke to get in, everything. They went through all my stuff. I tried to sleep there after this. The cops came, whatever, they fixed it, whatever. I tried to sleep there. I couldn't sleep there.
Yeah.
Like I was constantly tense. So I left, right? And so this was New Year's. So I go to a hotel and some of my friends are in. I just need to be around some friends this time. So friends are in Palm Desert. So I go out there to meet them, spend the night at the hotel. And I kept waking up in the middle of the night, just jumping up. I wasn't in the apartment when it got broken into.
Yeah.
But even then, still, I was afraid of somebody breaking into my apartment.
Because it's a safe space, It's like you believe when you're asleep, wherever you've chosen to sleep, that like no one's going to come in and take that away from you, take that safe space away from you. And also for someone to be in your home in any capacity it makes it feel like it's always penetrable.
Yeah, and this is me not there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm even more curious about your experience.
Mm-hmm.
When you're there, you're sleeping,
and
somebody breaks in, and it's not just a threat to take something from you in terms of money or physical. It's he wants to rob you of what you said, like your just sense of self. How do you get better
from that?
From PTSD? How do you, what helped you?
I think there were a few different things along the way that helped, because what became the most challenging thing that I faced, harder than facing him that night. I would face him, and I'm reluctant to say this, but I would face him that night 10 times over to not face the despair and self-pity that came in the months following. That I fell into a pit of self-pity where why me? Why did this happen to me? It's not fair. Just that feeling, it's not fair that it's happened to me. All of these things have been taken from me. All of these things have been taken away. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to have all new friendships. I didn't want a new body. I didn't want to go to physical therapy twice a week. I didn't choose this. This is not fair. And I was so angry about that. And I fell deep into this is not my life. This isn't what I wanted. And what turned me, the first thing I think was, I don't remember how I came to it, but understanding entitlement. What in me thinks that I'm entitled to fair? What in me thinks that that was promised? It's not. Like, fairness in our lives is not guaranteed by anyone. You know, like that, I had to kind of face that core belief that I was promised fairness, or I was promised my plan, and letting go of that first. And that's not like all of a sudden I realized and then I let
That's
it
not
go.
an easy thing to come to face with. But it's almost like looking at the world now as like dangerous. So how do you fight?
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's a thin line, because I just had a conversation about this recently. How do you fight keeping that same better word, lack of better word, sparkle in yourself without losing yourself into the fact that, damn, the world is not fair. Well, it's a dangerous world out there, and now you're even more guarded.
Right. I mean, that's a great question. And I think something that I am currently struggling with is part of the process was like building a shell, like an impenetrable shell. I remember at one point imagining shoving iron bars through my heart to keep my heart pumping, because it felt like my whole body was going to collapse. Everything was going to shut down. And I just remember thinking, like, you need to be strong. Like, you need to like push these iron bars through your heart. You need to keep yourself alive. You need to like create steel throughout your whole body, just under your skin. And then nobody can hurt you. And what I'm working on now is melting that ice and understanding again that people are safe, and understanding again that not everyone has an agenda that you come into contact with. But I do think the converse of that, you know, is saying, I'm not guaranteed safety. So there's power in that realization that I'm not guaranteed safety, which, like, I think you can come out of that with fear, or you can come out of that with preparedness, which for me, I'm trying to go to the place of preparedness rather than fear, so that I can relax and feel comfortable. You know what I mean?
What's helping you? What are the tools?
I think for me, I've heard a lot of people mention on your podcast, therapy is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Like working it through, talking about things, saying them out loud in a place where you're not going to feel judged, or someone's not going to give you a look like, oh, that's wrong. You know, like being able to say things out loud. I think working out for me consistently has been huge, because it reconnects my brain and my body, where if I get too much in my brain,
Yep.
I start to get, I get super negative. I get perfectionist. I get control. I get, you're not good enough. But if I reconnect my body, those thoughts kind of drift away.
Something about those endorphins too that you
Those
release during the
endorphins,
workout
how
just has
fast.
you feeling good.
And also being outside, you know, like being out in the sun. That was one thing in COVID. Like you couldn't go to the gym, so you got to go work outside. And I think the sun, you know, if you have access to the sun regularly, to like just feel that on your skin.
Guys, great setup over here.
Teed up.
Yeah.
But too, I think like relationships and family play a huge part. And then also being of service in whatever way you can. Whether that's just listening to a friend who's going through something even harder, or not, maybe not even as hard, you know, like just a friend who's going through something really hard, and lending yourself to that person, creating space for that person, being present enough to hear that person. It has helped me kind of dissipate all of those walls. You know what I mean? That like all in service of coming back to the present moment and not living in a narrative that your mind is creating to create a prison for you where you stay safe, quote unquote safe.
It's so beautiful that you see that, because I think that when we are going through tough times, we tend to get selfish,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about us. But what we don't realize is in giving, you get.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tough thing. And I'm happy that you're talking about it because people need to hear this. The ability to listen and be that ear for another person also gives you, I don't know, it just gives you strength. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know, maybe that's what it was built into us for this reason, so that we can.
It feels that way. It feels like the antidote.
Mm-hmm.
Like to be when you're feeling like everything has been taken away from you. It's also I also practice like scarcity to abundance and reframe things. You know, like when I think everything has been taken away, I'm thinking from a place of scarcity.
Absolutely.
And reframing it into, but I love who I am today. I have so much more to connect with people on. I'm so much stronger. I know the lengths that I can go to. I know these things about myself that not everyone has the opportunity to learn. And then to create space for other people, it's like abundance. Like I have enough that I can offer you from my well. And it reminds you that you have enough in your well, even if you don't feel like you do.
That's incredible. First off, I also got to say that you're like Superwoman for the fact that you were able to do all this and fight off a person who broke into your home. And I know a lot of people, I mean, it's just incredible what you were able to do. So they caught this guy.
They caught him.
And you have to go to trial. Thing about trauma is that's one of the things I was like, yo, are you sure you're okay to tell this story? I understand this how trauma
No,
works.
and thank you for that. Like you've been so respectful throughout the whole process of talking about this.
I know that's how it works, is sometimes you're reliving that same trauma. It must have been hard to go through it though in trial, especially with the person there going over and over this story. Tell me a little bit about that.
I think the trial, it was very hard, but in its own sense, it was hard. Like so part of it that I didn't say was that he admitted to someone close to him that he had been stalking me and watching me for a long time, and that he had also done this before to a woman that they've not been able to identify who this woman is. So I don't know if she's alive. I don't know what happened to her. But he was so clear with me that night. And then clear as in like, you could follow his train of thought. He was excited. He was nervous, but he wasn't erratic. He wasn't jumping all over the place as far as what he was saying. He had a mission. He had a goal, and he was carrying it out as you or I would. As far as what he was explaining and asking of me. But then my experience of him through the trial process was different. That he was acting incredibly erratic, like disruptive. Nothing could get done in it. Like, and I went into court thinking it's like the movies where the judge like bangs on the gavel, everybody's quiet, everybody sits down, but it was not like that. Like he, in a lot of the courtrooms I was in with him, was very much in control of the room. Like he was standing up, he was yelling at me. At one point I was on the stand in one of the preliminary hearings and he yelled, she's lying, pull down your shirt, show us your scars, she's lying. And he was maybe like 9 feet in front of me. And of course he was chained to a chair. He was restrained and I knew he couldn't get me. But I just kept thinking about like, if he had been at my apartment for 4 hours and carried out what he had planned to do, and then I had to face him like this, that would break me in half. For it to be okay for him to yell, show me your scars, pull down your shirt, show me your scars at me as a victim. You know what I mean? Like that happened. And he, like, it was a really, really long process to get to trial. He went through a lot of like competency evaluations with therapists, like trained therapists and psychotherapists. And I think it was maybe 3 or 4 times he went to be evaluated, and they always evaluated that he was competent. And he, at one of the hearings, was being taken out by the bailiff and said, how was that? Was that an Oscar-worthy performance? How did I do? So it became clear, and the judges started to say, like, he's trying to intimidate the witness by acting like this. He's trying to postpone proceedings, and he's trying to be placed in a mental hospital instead of go to prison. And because at first I was like, maybe this guy really is crazy. You know, like maybe this is how what his existence is like, what his experience is like. But after all of the hearings and competency evaluations, they were like, no, he's acting to do this. And there was also footage of him being interviewed by the police, and he's calm and coherent and like a normal seeming guy. So I think that was one of the biggest shocks to me as far as like what that experience would be like. But I will say, one of the times when I was on the stand when he was there, I was so scared of him, you know, so scared to look him in the eye, so scared to look at him, because we had been in the dark that night, and he just became like a figure in my life. And I was scared to look at the man and have, you know, like that character be fleshed out into a real human. Mm. But I remember he was yelling, and I was up on the stand, and I looked at him, and I was like, I'm going to try to look him in the eye. And he was staring. It looked like he was staring at me, but he was staring down at the floor in front of me. And I couldn't get him to look at me. And I realized like he's aware that he's no longer in control of this situation, and that he is facing something really serious.
How long did this trial last, and what was the verdict?
The preliminary hearings lasted for about 2 years, and the conversations between the lawyers. He went through a couple lawyers. He did something to the first lawyer that she had to recuse herself. And then he got another lawyer. So that kind of restarted the process. And the trial date was set to happen, I think, March 18th of 2020, around there. And COVID happened right at that time. Like my family, I think, was flying out the next day. And quarantine was announced. That I was at the grocery store, and I got calls from all these people like, everything's shut down. You have to go home. Everything's shut down. So it got postponed indefinitely. And then I think it was in October of 2020 that it resumed. And then it was about 4 weeks where I testified 2 days. I was the only witness, like eyewitness. And then they had, you know, like the people that processed the DNA, the police officers that were first on the scene. I think someone who stitched him up at the hospital came and testified. The detective on my case testified. And the jury, I think the jury deliberated for about 2 days after it was all said and done. And they came back with, he was charged with 6 counts. I think one was burglary with the intent to commit rape, which carried a life sentence. Assault with a deadly weapon. I think robbery, criminal threat. There's one more, and then mayhem, which, or they charged him with aggravated mayhem. Basically means permanently disabling someone on purpose. So because he injured my hand, he was guilty of mayhem. What they were trying to accuse him of was that if my arms hadn't been up, he would have cut my neck. Like he was trying to permanently disable me in that way. And the jury did not accuse him of that. They found him guilty of regular mayhem, which I didn't even know was a thing. That's a very strange word to be a
Never heard.
charge.
Yeah, never heard of this.
Yeah, all this was new to me in this experience, but he was found guilty on all counts, just found guilty of a lesser charge on the mayhem charge. It's to life in prison plus, I think, 3 years for prior crimes that he hadn't served for yet. And I went to the verdict reading and I went to the sentencing. And the sentencing was hard because, I mean, all of it was COVID, so there could only be a few people in the room. So it was me and my family, my parents. And then his dad was there and his dad's wife. And then I think a former girlfriend of his. And we were all able to give statements. So I gave a statement, my dad gave a statement, and I went first, my dad went second, and my dad expressed remorse to his family and to his dad and said, I know that you're losing a son, and I know that you're losing a lot, and I just want to say I'm so sorry to your family for what you're losing. And then his dad stood up and gave a speech that was, he said, like, you know, you have your baby and you look at your baby and your baby's perfect. And then they get to be 6 years old and they start to act out and you do whatever you can to set an example. And then they get to be a teenager and you can't, you know, you can't help them. And they also expressed, you know, to our family, you know, that for what we'd lost. And it was, you know, it was a hard moment between the two families. But, you know, from there, that's been the end of the trial for me. Like, I haven't been able to relax for 3 years. And I think after the trial was over, I was so afraid of what that would be and what the outcome would be. And if I would say what I needed to say in the way I needed to say it, and if I would have the courage to do it, and what the outcome would be, you know, all of it was unknown. And I think being able to relax has been such a huge shift in my life. Like, to not have to focus on that and make sure that I was healthy enough, that I was, you know, like in the right mind space to talk it through. Because it is, you know, like to talk through in the amount of detail that I had to talk through it on the stand. Yeah. It is like being there again, because they'll say like, okay, what angle was your head facing when he came at you with the knife on the bed, and like where on your, you know, it's so specific.
Where did the knife hit?
Exactly.
All these different it's questions. There's like, you have to really think through each detail.
And be in your skin at that moment to think to that level of detail, because it's so mathematic, you know, like it's so like, it's not about your experience as much as it is about like the logistics of who went where and when. Like having that in the rearview mirror has been a huge weight off of my shoulders.
We talk so much about the rebuild, and this conversation is for people who are going through, or who have been through, or who are want to prevent these things from happening. Do you suggest self-defense classes for women? When people ask you about how you got through what you went through?
No, like I hope this isn't a bad thing to say. Whenever people ask about self-defense, my response is always, I would love for women to learn self-offense. Like, why aren't we teaching women self-offense? Like, when he's in that room with me, I don't want to just defend myself. I want to come at him and be able to do damage. You know what I mean? So I've been self-offense and like I said, preparedness, where I, without being vigilant or without being fearful, thinking through what you would do in a scenario and what lengths you're willing to go to achieve that, and really stretching your imagination to what that would be. I think it's a muscle that, like, if you stretch your brain that way, without being obsessive or living in fear, it helps for your brain to have that muscle memory to think through, like, this is a situation that I need to go to that place that I've prepared for. And I've been taking boxing classes, which for me is a great outlet for, like, the feelings that I feel, that I still feel rage. I've just learned to manage it and I want to channel it. So working through those emotions, and then also the physicality of it is that I feel really strong and I know how to punch. And, I just think preparedness, like mental preparedness, and then respecting your body enough to stay physically fit enough to protect yourself, with that in mind, that, like, my body is a tool that I would need if I wanted to protect myself.
The mental part of it, it's not linear, like we said earlier.
Right.
It's always ups and downs. How are you doing right now? And do you have any coping strategies for the days where you're not feeling your best?
Yes. I think, well, one, right now, I feel really good. I recognize, like you said, that, like, everything is nonlinear when it comes to mental health, and that even when I feel like I have it figured out, like, I still am prone to the thinking, like, I just need to get to X and then it'll be fine. Where it's going to be lifelong, that things will pop up for me that I don't expect. And then I'll have a new challenge to face. But I think as far as coping mechanisms, grounding myself by touching something if I'm starting to feel panicked. Like, if I'm feeling anxious or afraid, like touching my chair and, like, talking to myself, like, okay, it's the texture is this, I'm feeling wind on my skin.
It's like being present.
And to bring myself back to the present moment so that I don't drift off into a scared place, like a scared narrative that I've created.
Are you a meditation person at all?
I do meditate.
Mindfulness?
I do. And, like, I don't do it as much as I should.
None of us do. I wish I prayed and meditated as much as I should too.
Exactly. But I do absolutely, when I meditate, feel like a core relaxation in coming back to the present moment. Something I also recognize that I do is I breathe really shallow normally. And I think from trauma,
it's a fight or flight response too. Yeah.
Exactly. So physiologically connecting and, like, recognizing, okay, you're breathing really shallow, give yourself a moment to take a few really big breaths. Yeah. Has helped a lot. And I think just understanding why the things are happening to you that are happening makes a huge difference. Like, once you have a rationale for why this is happening, or like for me at least, like, what brain function is happening to protect you, like, at the end of the day, your brain with a lot of these things, I think, is trying to protect you. It just doesn't know how to do it in a complex way, So treating yourself with compassion, like treating yourself with empathy, having a ton of patience for yourself, makes a huge difference for me. Recognizing that everything is temporary, that, like, even at the lowest low point that you can be at, that just the nature of things is that is an ebb to a flow. that it will come, the pendulum will swing back the other way. You just have to use your imagination to imagine a reality where that is possible, if that makes sense.
I think one of the things that someone taught me is in the middle of anything that I'm going through, I always got to remember this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of the worst valleys and the toughest days, I remind myself that this too shall pass. And when I'm doing the most incredible thing, I also remind myself that this too shall pass. And it helps me actually enjoy the moment more.
Yeah,
because
whether
I
it's good
realize
or
it's not-
bad.
Yeah.
Like all of it is, I mean, it's easy to say when you're in a good place, but all of it is a gift. And like we talked about the Taoist parable of the farmer, where the farmer
Actually, it's good.
loses his
Tell a
horse.
story. Tell a story. That's a great story to tell right now.
It's very much in line with what you just said. Like, a farmer loses his prize stallion. The stallion runs out of the farm, and he doesn't see the stallion again. And a neighbor comes over and says to the farmer, "I'm so sorry for your loss. You know, I know this horse was so prized to you. It was so valuable." And the farmer says, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" Then the next day, the horse comes back and brings 10 more stallions with it. The neighbor again comes over and says, "I'm so excited for you. This is
Great.
incredible. Like, I'm so excited for your good fortune." And the farmer says, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" Then his son is riding one of the horses, breaks his leg. The neighbor comes over again and says, "I'm so sorry." Farmer says the same thing. "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" And then the army comes by to take his son away and sign him for the army. And he can't go because his leg is broken. And again, the farmer says in his wisdom, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" And that also was a turning point for me, that like, this too shall pass, you know, the greatest peaks and the greatest valleys. All of it is just, it will come and go, and change is going to continue to happen. And you can either fight and fight and fight against it, or you can move with it and adapt and recognize that all of these things are temporary, and that the pendulum will always swing the other way.
So grateful for you sharing your story. This is all incredible. I already am getting the red light over here. So
No, thank you so much for having me.
So I have to ask my favorite question to end it all. My favorite question is always, if you could talk to your younger self, and it could just be a few years ago, you could talk to your younger self, what would you tell her about the all grown up version of yourself?
I would say, you're never going to believe what's in store for you.
How much of a badass you are. Start there.
I think, you know, like being a little kid in Wisconsin, I couldn't have fathomed that I would get to the place that I am in my life right now. I dreamed of things that I never thought possible, and they've become possible. I would have never dreamed that this attack would have happened to me, that someone would come into my home and that would happen. I wouldn't imagine that I would come back. Like when I was at the lowest point, I wouldn't have imagined that I would come back from that. And I think I would just say to myself, just ride the ride, and just trust and do what you need to do day in and day out. Every day is a new opportunity. Every day is going to present challenges, and that never ends. Like challenges, you don't get to a point where challenges stop. They just keep coming. They just come in a new way, and you have new techniques to handle them. So just look at all of these things as opportunities to acquire new techniques to meet your challenges.
Speaking of a new challenge, you are starting a new podcast.
I am. I didn't know I was going to get a plug.
Podcasts are one big challenge for all of us right now, but it's also great because for me, I like I said, I just want to illuminate other people's platforms. I want to use mine to increase the awareness of different issues that people have, so that we can help cure other people as they're going through their stuff. So you have a podcast coming out soon.
I do.
You're going to be telling your story.
I do. It's called Extraordinary. and it's not released yet because I'm still working on it. But
Perfectionist.
you can perfection and control. But you can follow me on IG, extraordinary.podcast, and there I can give updates.
How
But
about your regular Instagram too?
and my regular Instagram, well, that's just hey Miss Collins. That's just me doing what I do every day, and dogs, boxing.
You see her at boxes, she can go.
Thank you. But
Wait, what else? We got TikTok, we got Twitter,
oh, I need to catch up on all the platforms.
Facebook.
I need to do.
What we got?
I have none of those. But the podcast, I'm hoping like it's not only that this story is extraordinary, but that the people that have contributed along the way have contributed in extraordinary ways, including my family, including friends, taking cues from their different vantage points and illuminating what's extraordinary about their experience in this process. So yeah, I hope it is released within the next month or two, but we'll see.
I got it here. All right, this is the showdown right now. This is how do you say it? The drop? How do you say when you get an exclusive?
Oh yeah, like
This is the
an
exclusive
exclusive
announcement for the drop of the new podcast. All right, extraordinary.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. Like, you have this incredible gift of curiosity and this immense strength to listen to these stories. It's not easy. And to like the alchemy to create something good from it is incredible. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
Hey, listen, God gave me this path. They put me in front of amazing people to make this stuff happen. Look at this incredible view.
No kidding.
I'm just excited that I have the platform to do it. And, you're doing the same thing with your story as well. So I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming. Do you want to sign us out? You started us off, so you got to sign us out now.
Signing off from Extraordinary Wait, I did my own.
Ooh, see, she's ready. She's ready for
I'm ready for it.
You could take this. You could definitely take this setup whenever you want. I'm renting it out to her.
No, signing off from Rebuilding the Beast.
All right, let's go eat now.
All right, let's go.
Hey, Festus here. I hope you liked that episode. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and here's some more episodes that you might like. On this side.